If you're looking for sci-fi, there just might be something on this list for you. Hello BookTube, I'm Jonathan, and welcome to Words in Time. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about modern sci-fi. Recently, I've made videos on classic sci-fi and 1980s sci-fi, which I view as a bit of a transition from the classic to modern approach to sci-fi storytelling. And what I want to share with you today is 8 of my favorite modern sci-fi books. And I've broken each recommendation down by subgenre, and I've also just made up a couple of my own subcategories as well. So let's get into them. First up, we have one of my favorite subgenres of sci-fi, and that is space opera. And for this, I picked House of Suns by Alastair Reynolds. So what is the premise for House of Suns? Well, our main character, Abigail Gentian, clones herself 999 times into what are known as shatterlings. And these shatterlings travel throughout the galaxy. Now, 6 million years in the future, these shatterlings are getting together for one of their 200,000-year reunions, and are now known as the Gentian line. Well, at one of these reunions, the Gentian line is attacked, and it's up to them to figure out exactly whom they have been attacked by and why. So one of the main reasons that I picked this book is because of the sci-fi concepts. I don't think I'm exaggerating when I say that this book blew my mind nearly every 50 pages. I couldn't believe not only the quantity, but the quality of the sci-fi concepts, and so many cool ideas were just rattling around in my brain for weeks after I finished reading it. House of Suns then combines those awesome ideas, which do lean towards the harder end of the sci-fi spectrum, with an intriguing plot and some interesting characters. This one pretty much ticks all of the sci-fi boxes for me and is going to be near the top of any of my sci-fi lists. I highly recommend you pick up House of Suns by Alastair Reynolds. Up next, we have another staple of sci-fi, and that is First Contact. For this subgenre, I picked Children of Time by Adrian Tchaikovsky. So what is the premise for Children of Time? In the future, humans attempt to terraform and colonize another planet to live on, and they use a nanovirus in order to speed up evolution. But something goes wrong with the mission, and the nanovirus ends up infecting a species of spiders, which rapidly increases their intelligence. In the far future, another group of humans looking for refuge come across this planet, but unbeknownst to them, this planet is now full of highly intelligent spiders. Something that really worked for me in Children of Time was how we got to follow this human story, as well as learn about this spider society and how these two intertwine. I love following the spiders, getting to see them evolve over time, and I thought it was really well done how Tchaikovsky kind of used a little bit of mapping over some things throughout human society and history in terms of technology, religion, society, how the spiders develop, but also how other aspects were completely different to the human experience and how they were unique to the spiders. In terms of the human story, I didn't find all of the characters super engrossing right away, but I think it built to something really special, and the emotional payoffs towards the end of the book are some of the most powerful things I've read in sci-fi. If you're looking for some deep world building with a little bit of science combined with philosophy, then I hope you enjoy Children of Time as much as I did. Alright, for our next subgenre, we have Post-Apocalyptic Sci-Fi. And for this one, I picked Oryx and Crake by Margaret Atwood. So what is the premise for this one? Well, in Oryx and Crake, we follow 2 timelines. One is a near-future dystopian society, and the other is a little further into the future, which is set after a post-apocalyptic event. Our main character is called Snowman. So why is it called Oryx and Crake? Well, you'll have to jump in and find out for yourself as you go on this chilling journey. Where this book succeeded for me was in the exploration of themes. I think Margaret Atwood makes some really interesting observations about where society could be headed, and the way that some of those things play out in the near future were rather confronting. This book definitely made me feel a little bit uncomfortable at times, and definitely made me question why my professor recommended it to me without letting me know that ahead of time. So there you go, consider yourselves warned. Personally, I didn't find many of the characters particularly likable, and there wasn't a ton of plot progression. But if you enjoy post-apocalyptic stories with rich settings that explore deep themes and are beautifully written, then I think Oryx and Crake could be a hit for you. Moving on, we have hard sci-fi. And for this one, I picked The Three-Body Problem by Cixin Liu. So what's the premise for The Three-Body Problem? Set against the backdrop of the Chinese Cultural Revolution, strange things start happening to prominent scientists. And this could be linked to a mysterious mission that is sending messages out into space. While this is a modern sci-fi book, it definitely has a bit of a classic feel. I'm a massive fan of Arthur C. Clarke, and to me, this felt like it had some Clarke-esque type ideas mixed with some Chinese and modern influences. This one can be a bit polarizing, as the focus of the book definitely is the sci-fi concepts. The writing can be a little bit stiff, and you could describe the characters as being somewhat cold, so that might not work for everyone. If you read the first book and you hate it, that's okay. The series isn't for you. If you read the first book and you quite like it, but you don't love it and you're not sure whether to continue, I highly recommend that you do. Because I really enjoyed the first book. It was a solid 4-star book for me, but then I absolutely loved books 2 and 3. Absolute 5-star reads. I was blown away by The Dark Forest and absolutely loved Death's End as well. If you're looking for a series with some hard sci-fi and some ideas that are just going to absolutely melt your brain, I highly recommend The Three-Body Problem and the Remembrance of Earth's Past trilogy. Up next, and this is a bit of a hybrid genre, I've picked Sci-Fantasy. And for this one, I'm recommending Empire of Silence, Book 1 of the Sun Eater series by Christopher Rocchio. So the premise for this one is that thousands of years in the future, in a galactic empire, we follow our main character called Hadrian Marlowe. The story is told from his first-person POV, and he tells us right away that in this story, he goes on to destroy a sun, wiping out an alien race and killing billions. Some people view him as a hero, and some view him as a monster. We must go on this journey with him to decide for ourselves. I think this one will appeal to fantasy fans because this is Sword and Planet sci-fi. It's going to have a few familiar fantasy tropes as well as some incredible sword fighting. I think it's also going to appeal to sci-fi fans because it has some amazing concepts, and some of the sci-fi ideas in this book really blew me away. And I think it's going to appeal to pretty much everyone because it has beautiful prose, really well thought out characters, some rich themes, and epic world building. Whether you're a sci-fi fan or fantasy fan, I highly recommend you pick up Empire of Silence by Christopher Rocchio. Moving on, we have a recommendation for what I'm calling new and old sci-fi readers, and that is Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. The premise for Project Hail Mary is that our main character, Ryland Grace, wakes up with memory loss. As he starts to recall events from his past, it's through these recollections that he starts to piece together exactly what has happened and what's at stake. I think whether you're an experienced sci-fi reader or you're newer to the genre, either way, you're gonna find something to enjoy in this book. Sci-fi is my favorite genre, and I love Project Hail Mary. My dad, shout out Papa Words in Time, doesn't read a lot of sci-fi or fantasy. He also loved Project Hail Mary. Some of my booktube friends like Dominish Books and Jake Bishop, they read a lot more fantasy than they do sci-fi. They were big fans of Project Hail Mary as well. I think some of the mainstream appeal of this book starts with the pacing. Andy Weir is always throwing problems at our main character, Ryland Grace. He always keeps things moving along, and the solution to these problems is often science. And I think the genius of this book is how Andy Weir makes the science accessible. To me, it never felt like I was reading a textbook or the story got slowed down by scientific exposition. It was always told in a really interesting way, and it kind of made sci-fi seem cool. Speaking of The Martian, I think some of the strengths of that book are present here as well, but it does a couple of things to differentiate itself. Firstly, I think the scope of the ideas is much more expansive and much more ambitious, and I think Andy Weir really succeeded in that department. And secondly, in terms of the character work, I thought some of the emotional moments landed really well in this book. I had an incredible time with this one. I feel like it's going to appeal to a lot of readers, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. And for our second last category, we have a recommendation for fans of Christopher Nolan. And for this one, I picked Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. What is the premise for Dark Matter? Well, when our main character, Jason, regains consciousness after being kidnapped, the world around him seems somewhat normal, but things aren't quite right. His wife is no longer his wife, and instead of being a high school physics professor, he is now a celebrated physicist. Jason then has to try and solve this mystery and figure out whether he's been drugged, or whether he's in a different universe, or whether he's just gone crazy. Similarly to Project Hail Mary, I feel a strength of this book was its pacing. I absolutely blew through it. It felt like I was reading a screenplay for a Christopher Nolan film like Memento or Inception. This one hits the ground running and doesn't let up. While the character work might not be the deepest, I was invested in the characters and I was completely hooked by the sci-fi concepts. While it might play a little fast and loose with the science, if you buy into the premise, I think you will not be able to put this one down trying to figure out what is going on and what will happen next. And lastly, we have a bit of a left field recommendation, and that is for Pulpy Sci-Fi, and I have picked Deathstalker by Simon R. Green. So what is the premise for Deathstalker? In a galactic empire ruled by fear, Owen Deathstalker suddenly finds himself outlawed with a bounty on his head. Fleeing the forces of the Empress, he embarks on a journey that will introduce him to outlaws, reveal family secrets, and set him on a collision course with the power of the throne. This one might not appeal to everyone as it's pulpy, it's trashy, it's tropey, but most of all, I think it's fun. This takes a bit of a kitchen sink approach to storytelling, but I think it has some weird and wonderful sci-fi concepts and some cool and crazy characters. If you like political scheming, sword fights, and gunfights, as well as an over-the-top approach to sci-fi storytelling, I think you're also going to have a lot of fun with Deathstalker. So there you go guys, those are 8 of my modern sci-fi recommendations. Let me know some of your favorite modern sci-fi books and let me know if you're interested in picking any of these up. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to like and subscribe, and you can find more sci-fi content over here.